I'm Jolene Kent. We're at TechCrunch Disrupt New York, and we're here with an exclusive interview with the AOL CEO, Tim Armstrong. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Last time I saw you, we were in our office together, so it's nice to be out of the office and at TechCrunch Disrupt.
And flooded with hundreds of startups here trying to make it. So tell me, you yourself may be going through some potential changes over at Yahoo, or AOL and Verizon. Verizon bidding for Yahoo. Those bids are being considered right now. Do you want a piece of Yahoo, and how would you run it?
Well, I would say, one thing, it's been a year basically this week since we announced the Verizon deal, and the deal has gone very well. We had our best quarter ever in Q1 as a business, and we're really, really focused on the future of growing to our 2020 goals, which is to get to 2 billion users. As part of that, we're looking at organic product development and inorganic deals. Yahoo's been mentioned. We've commented publicly to say if it were the right deal at the right price, it might be something we're interested in. But Yahoo's its own company, has its own process, and we can't bank on that. So we're in development right now of really looking at our 2020 vision and strategy and making sure we execute against it.
But you have been the head of a company, you are still the head of that company that has been acquired. And it's a very difficult, challenging process, even if it turns out well, as it did in the case of AOL and Verizon. What advice do you have for Marissa Mayer as she's navigating this with Yahoo?
Yeah, I think, one is I know Marissa very well and worked with her for many years, almost 10 years at Google, so she probably has all the advice she needs right now from advisors and her management team. But I would say the biggest thing that we've learned in the M&A process overall has been really making sure there's actually a coherent strategy and vision, because doing deals for a deal's sake is probably the road to disaster. And really the reason the Verizon deal has worked out is we had the same vision, same alignment, and really had a very clear path of integrating. We worked with them for a year before the deal got done. So I think it's really about strategy, structure, and cost structure. And if those three things are in alignment, deals usually work. If one of those is off, they usually don't work.
Well, you guys have 500 million monthly active users on AOL right now. Facebook, by contrast, has many more daily active users, more than 1 billion, but they've come under fire for potentially suppressing some conservative posts in the newsfeed and the trending topics. Just wondering, they're coming out now and saying, the VP of Search at Facebook saying, we don't do this, and this is not something that we do. But of course, with the election, there's been so much impact on how people consume news on AOL and on Facebook. What do you think about that situation at Facebook?
Yeah, and I think two things. One is that I think it'd be highly unlikely that Facebook is tilting their information for consumers, because I think at the end of the day, all of us have one word with consumers, is trust. If the consumers don't trust you, you're not going to have them on your service. And the second piece is, we own media properties and we get lots of feedback from consumers. And I think that, as long as you're taking feedback from consumers and looking at the service overall, which I believe Facebook's one of the best companies in the world at doing that. So I think that there's going to be a lot of noise in this political cycle based on the candidates and based on how different the candidates are overall. And I think all of the companies that serve tech and media are going to have to probably make sure that they're doing things that are in the user's best interest. I have no doubt that Facebook's doing that.
As a CEO, how do you separate your own personal political views from how you run your company? In the case of Mark Zuckerberg, we know that he's anti-Donald Trump, and so how do you make sure you keep those things clean to maintain the trust of your billion or 500 million users? It must be kind of tough.
Yeah, well, for me, I don't know what Mark does, but my policy is that I give zero editorial input. I don't go to editorial meetings. So I think in the years that we've owned TechCrunch and Huffington Post, I don't think I've given direct feedback on any editorial coverage overall on anything. And I think that's one of the benefits to having independent journalism. So from where I sit, I think from a CEO standpoint, my job is to make sure that the journalists have resources and can grow, and not to really get involved in editorial coverage, and that's been my stance on it. I don't know how everybody else operates.
Well, you are also, together with Fred Wilson of Union Square Ventures, putting together a group of tech companies to help better inform government officials about how they can help the tech community grow here in New York City. Up on stage earlier, you guys were talking about regulations and making sure that tech companies have a voice in that. How do you feel the regulatory environment is for growth in New York City right now?
I think, well, first of all, tech is the most important industry in New York City now. It's the #1 fastest growing job category. It's had double to triple the job growth of any other industry in the last 15 years. There's been 27 exits over $500 million for the employees and investors in tech. So I think right now tech has a emotional seat at the table because everybody knows it's an important part of the city. And what we're really doing is putting an infrastructure seat at the table now so that we can talk through things like jobs and immigration and housing and all the things that need to get covered in New York City. And we've been working closely with Mayor de Blasio. We prior worked closely with Mayor Bloomberg. Senator Chuck Schumer was at our opening event last week. So we're integrating as best we can the horsepower in New York City. It's the #2 city in the country right now for venture capital investing. So
a lot of money on the table.
Yes.
What about other city governments working with tech companies? In the case of Austin, we saw Uber and Lyft have to leave because they couldn't come to an agreement. What kind of advice would you give, say, Uber's Travis Kalanick, of avoiding these things or making something happen in a compromised fashion?
Yeah, I think as a country right now and all the policies that are happening, we're facing a situation where you have the new economy companies bumping into the historic economy. And in those cases, I think there are going to be places, because the disruption is real overall, and over time there'll have to be a set of policies and guidelines, and I think in the Uber and Lyft situation in Austin, that's something that's up to those individual companies to make their business decisions, and up to the local government to decide what kind of services they're going to have in that city. And I think you've seen that across the world with Uber and Lyft so far, and I think it's a real life case of what we're going to be dealing with overall in terms of those two economies coming together. And my guess is over time there'll be a place where the two meet each other, and there's great examples of cities and areas where that has happened. So I think if you're a city and you're not working in the new economy, it may be a detriment to your economy over time. So they're going to be highly incentivized to work with the new economy companies.
Well, speaking of working with new companies, I know Snapchat and Facebook have done a lot in video, some of it live. How does AOL position to compete against Snapchat and Facebook, or are you going to partner with them? What's the preferred path forward here as you try to build more eyeballs to hit those billions of people you want to reach?
Yeah, we have a partnership strategy, and I think one of the things that's been a huge benefit to us and what led to the Verizon deal is we're essentially partners with every major company in Silicon Valley, all the companies in LA, all the companies in New York, London, Tokyo. So we're one of the largest partnership companies on the planet, and I look at what Facebook and Snapchat are doing as basically fueling the platforms for our content and eventually for our advertising. And I think we're at a tipping point right now. As disruptive as the internet was 20 years ago, the mobile economy and these platforms are going to be more disruptive than the internet was. And I think for companies that move quickly, it's going to be a really big opportunity. For companies that don't move quickly, I think it's going to present really big challenges. So we're focused on partnerships with them, and we have very successful partnerships with both of those companies right now.
There's a lot of disruption going on in politics right now as well. What do you think about the presumptive Republican nominee, Donald Trump?
Well, here's what I vote for. I vote for the most contentious, most discussed, most elongated presidential process ever, because
well, you got it.
With our media properties, it makes a huge difference for us in terms of the amount of traffic and focus. So I think there's going to be a real decision to be made, and there's going to be 10 million conversations and topics that come up between now and the election. There's a benefit for our business, and it's a benefit for the consumers in this country, because they're going to see every piece of both candidates before the election, and it'll be a win for the consumers. It'll be a win for us. So I'm happy if there's a lot of contention around it.
All right, very optimistic. Staying out of the editorial fray. We always appreciate it. Tim Armstrong,
Thanks,
CEO of AOL. Thanks for
you.
joining us. And for more, check out foxnews.com.